Today, we're going deep on Jonathan Rosen's memoir, The Best Minds. And really, this is one of those stories that just sticks with you. It's about a brilliant friendship that starts in this picture-perfect American suburb and ends in an absolute, unimaginable tragedy. It really forces you to ask some tough questions about genius, about madness, and about the stories we tell ourselves. And you can feel the weight of this right from the start. The author, Jonathan Rosen, makes it clear this isn't a story he ever wanted to tell. It was something he had to do. He calls it a dreadful thing he'd been avoiding, a necessary encounter with his own past and with the life of his childhood best friend, Michael Laudor. So, let's go back to the very beginning. We're in New Rochelle in the 1970s. Think good schools, green lawns, and two young boys who form this incredibly intense, inseparable bond.
So here's the setup, right? You've got these two kids, Jonathan and Michael, both sons of professors, both total bookworms. But Michael is on another level. We're talking about a truly staggering intellect. The kid had a photographic memory, and he could read something like 1,200 words a minute. Rosen said he could inhale a page the same way he'd inhale a slice of pizza. Just unbelievable.
And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? On the surface, their world was perfect. A classic American childhood. They lived in these small, book-rich houses, walked to school together, spent their time decoding song lyrics, always competing in this friendly, intellectual way. It really seemed like they were both destined for these amazing futures. But, of course, like any perfect picture, it's fragile. And the first tiny cracks in that beautiful painting, well, they were just starting to appear. The whole story was about to break apart. Okay, so as the first signs of Michael's illness started to show, they appeared against this really specific cultural background, one that just didn't have the right tools or even the language to really get what was happening. This is so important to understand. In the late 20th century, there was this romantic idea around madness. It was seen as a kind of rebellion, a form of countercultural genius. And this wasn't just in the movies. This idea actually seeped into law and public policy, creating this massive cultural blind spot to what severe mental illness actually is. But the clinical reality, it's not romantic at all. Psychosis isn't some charming quirk or a form of rebellion. It is a biological condition. It's a devastating break where your brain's ability to process reality completely falls apart. So for Michael, this wasn't some intellectual exercise. It wasn't a sensible response to an insane world. It was a private, terrifying horror show. The popular theories of the day offered zero comfort, only confusion, as his own brilliant mind started turning against him in the most frightening way imaginable. But then, something absolutely incredible happens. Michael doesn't just get better, he stages one of the most remarkable comebacks you can possibly imagine. And in doing so, he creates this powerful public story that everybody, and I mean everybody, wanted to believe in. Just look at this timeline. After a diagnosis of schizophrenia, Michael gets into Yale Law School. His story is so amazing that the New York Times does a whole profile on him. That article leads to a massive book deal, which then leads to a Hollywood movie deal. He literally became a cultural phenomenon. He was the perfect embodiment of a myth our culture absolutely loves. The hero who goes into the darkness and comes back, wounded but victorious, ready to share his wisdom. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a conqueror who had defeated his own mind. And the scale of this success was just staggering. $2.1 million. That's for the book and movie deals combined. And that number, it wasn't just money. It was validation. It felt like proof that the redemption story was real, that this incredible mind had truly healed itself. But really, the whole triumph was a performance. While the world was cheering for the comeback kid, the illness that he had supposedly defeated was still right there, just lurking beneath the surface of this perfect million-dollar story. And as Michael struggled behind the scenes to write the very book that had made him famous, that whole redemption story started to collapse. The public triumph gave way to an intensifying private hell. The psychosis was coming back, and it was horrifyingly vivid. These weren't just vague fears. We're talking about visceral hallucinations. People he knew were literally transforming into monsters right in front of him. And then, his paranoia started to zero in on the people closest to him. In his fractured reality, his own parents had been replaced by sinister doubles. It's a terrifying condition. The very people he loved the most were now the source of his greatest fear.
This quote, this just shows you how profoundly his world was distorted. Simple, everyday objects were suddenly filled with this horrifying, symbolic weight. Can you imagine living in a world where a pepper shaker represents the ashes of your ancestors? The suffering there is it's almost impossible to even comprehend.
And it all led to this. He stopped taking his medication. His fiancée, Carrie, the woman he loved, became an imposter in his mind, a wind-up doll, a fake. He became more and more isolated. And then on a June night in 1998, in the grip of that delusion, he stabbed her to death. She was pregnant with their child.
That horrific act just shattered everything. The comeback story, the friendship, so many lives. And it left behind these brutal questions that, honestly, we're all still grappling with today.
So what happened in the end? Well, the legal system decided that Michael was too sick to even understand the charges against him. He wasn't sent to prison. Instead, he was committed to a high-security psychiatric hospital, and that's where he still is today.
But this was so much more than just a personal tragedy. It was a total systemic failure. It was a failure of a mental health system that basically abandoned the most seriously ill. And it was a failure of a culture that was so desperate for a simple, happy ending that it completely ignored the warning signs of a much more complex and painful truth.
And that leaves us with the book's central, haunting question. You have two boys, two brilliant minds, growing up in the exact same environment. One goes on to write the story, the other becomes its tragic subject. And it just forces you to ask, what is that line between a healthy mind and a sick one, between fortune and total ruin? And at the end of the day, how much of that journey is ever really in our control?